John,
John is absent.
Jay,
Here.
Kurt,
He's excused.
Bob,
Here.
Nancy,
Yes.
Cindy,
I think she's in town. We'll just invite her when she gets here.
Kate, and Mark.
Here. With that being said and the roll being taken, we have a quorum. There's 4 of us. Hopefully Cindy shows up. Member Haverlick won't be participating in any more assembly meetings. He is in Oregon, I believe. He's turned in his iPad before he left, and he doesn't intend to call in to the meeting. So we're down to 6. Here's Cindy. She's here.
Hey.
Add to the roll. We'll wait for you to get settled in here.
Well, maybe not.
Just wanted to make sure that was the right sign, right? Are we almost up to speed?
Got her.
Probably want to take your coat off, I suppose. Huh? Okay, with the roll being done, it's time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting from August 20th.
So move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve those meeting minutes. Is there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes from that meeting are approved. Is there any amendments to today's agenda? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve today's meeting agenda as presented. Bob?
2 questions. The first one, under the consent agenda, was the intent on the budget side of that, the budget calendar, is simply a yes or a no vote, as we go with it or we don't, or was there to be discussion with it?
Whatever the assembly wishes. I mean, that's a calendar that finance director and I put together. If the assembly wants to change it, that is entirely up to you.
Okay.
So that's something we could do at that time when we address it under the consent agenda?
Yes. And the second item is I'd like to, under assembly discussion items, I'd like to have a few minutes to talk about where I was at the municipal league meeting, and we talked about 2 items which are of interest to this group. One's marijuana and one's the budget, the state budget. And I'd like to have a few minutes at the end to talk about that if I
Sure,
could, please.
I'll write it down, but if I forget, just remind me. Thanks. Okay, so those are one change, I guess, to today's agenda. Any other changes? Okay, all those in favor, say aye if you approve today's agenda as amended to add that council or assembly discussion item.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay, so we'll add that to the end of the meeting and we'll move on. Public hearings, there's none listed on today's agenda. Bid awards, there's none there. Visitors' views related to today's agenda. Any visitors in the audience? Will you please step forward and state your name and who you represent and what you want to talk about.
Hi, my name is Becky Knight, and I'm representing myself. I just learned of this proposed, this is regarding the Tongass the roadless rule resolution. I just learned of the proposed resolution this morning. I would first like to express my appreciation for the Ninth Circuit's decision. The ruling was a great news for Southeast Alaska residents and for all folks who visit our world-class, spectacular home. What remains of the wild and undeveloped parts of the Tongass are the driving forces of our local economy. These areas include important wildlife habitat necessary to local residents for hunting, fishing, recreation, and tourism. This ruling ensures that those places will remain protected as they should. Regarding the resolution in particular, I urge the Assembly to become fully informed of what the rule accomplishes and protects and its impact on our local community. and that means going as far as reading the rule and reading the decision. As you may be aware, the Forest Service has recognized the impacts of logging old growth and is now transitioning to logging Tonga's second growth. Therefore, there is no longer any need to build roads. Existing roads were built beginning decades ago based on the premise that their construction would facilitate future timber entries. The existing 5,000 miles of roads on the Tongass will do just that, facilitate entry into second growth areas. This includes the hundreds of miles of roads on Mitkof, Kupernof, and the mainland over at Thomas Bay. The resolution cites the Tongass National Forest as a 17 million acre forest, implying, if one doesn't know any better, that the entire forest is composed of trees. In reality, it's 2/3 rocks and ice, and the amount of trees that are economical to log are far less than one would assume by looking out the window. The Forest Service, in 2003, when this rule was initially introduced, had a monstrous backlog of road maintenance needs nationwide. When the roadless rule was first proposed, of the 383,000 miles of roads, that's in 2003, there's probably quite a bit more by now, nationwide of National Forest System roads, only 21% met their maintenance standards. 50% were declared unsafe for driving. While I do not have Tongass figures at immediate hand, I think it is safe to say that the Tongass is indeed no different and quite possibly in worse condition. Moreover, how many miles of roads do we really need when the agency can't even afford to maintain what we have? As an example, on Mitkof and Kupernof Island alone, there exist about 36 culverts on each road system that block fish passage and violate federal law, the Clean Water Act. That's really important to a fishing community. These red pipes have been in this condition for years and years, and the agency always cites lack of funds to repair them, yet the agency continues to propose more and more road construction. I personally know of road workers that would love the local work of repairing these culverts. I believe there are several misconceptions about the rule. One claim is that the roadless rule prevents building roads to mining projects. However, the rule's plain language makes it clear that it does not prohibit road construction in a roadless area, quote, if a road is needed pursuant to reserved or outstanding rights or is provided for by statute or treaty. In fact, the archaic general mining law of 1872 guarantees reasonable access for the development of valid mining claims. Likewise, pursuant to the Federal Power Act, the FPA, all hydropower applicants may seek approval for roads, for dams, power plants, transmission lines, and other facilities. The FPA empowers the Forest Service to grant or deny such requests based on their impact and necessity, regardless of whether they are in or outside of roadless areas. In 2011, the Secretary of Agriculture redelegated authority to the Forest Service to issue the Special Use Authority to permit the Blue Lake Hydroelectric Project within the Sitka Urban Inventoried Roadless Area. Secretary Vilsack recommended that the project go forward because the alternative would, quote, be more costly and environmentally harmful than diesel-powered generators, unquote. And, quote, the agency has taken all measures available to preserve the character of the roadless area. Finally, a fear that the roadless rule would prevent isolated communities from connecting with each other is another red herring. The roadless rule contains a specific exemption for federal aid highways, the principal funding source for new road connections between communities in southeast Alaska. As noted by the Alaska Federal District Court, the argument that the roadless rule will obstruct new community and road connections is, quote, not supported by any evidence and speculative at best. And locally, regarding our deer populations in Game Management Unit 3, which includes Mitkof and Kupernof Island, and the woodpecker area out at the end of our road, and a 2002 record of woodpecker project area record of decision regarding deer hunting. This issue centers around the popularity of the woodpecker project area for deer hunting by the residents of Mitkof Island and the concern that any timber harvest on the island will affect deer populations. And I mention this because there's a roadless area down in the woodpecker area. Metcalf Island has traditionally been used by residents of Petersburg for subsistence deer hunting. The Woodpecker Project area is the most heavily used part of Metcalf for deer hunting due to the accessibility provided by the road system that connects to Petersburg and the higher numbers of deer inhabiting the area. The number of deer is higher in the Woodpecker project area because of good forage and less snow accumulation found on the south-facing slopes near saltwater. And the reason I mention that is because that roadless area contributes greatly to what remains of our deer herd. And I just, off the cuff too, I would say that, in this times of fiscal conservatism, we should really be fixing what we have, not adding more to the pot to spend billions of dollars more on road repairs. In 2007, the National Forest System backlog was $10 billion in arrears on maintenance needs. Anyway, I don't support the resolution. I hope you don't. But regardless whether you do or not, I urge you to read what's contained, the roadless rule itself, as well as the ruling. Thank you very much.
Other visitors today with views related to today's agenda? Mike, please come forward, state your name. Who you represent, please.
My name is Mike Steinbrook. I'm a Borough resident, and I'm representing myself. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. Thank you for this opportunity to come and speak. I didn't prepare a whole lot to say. I would just like to state that I do not support this resolution to exempt the Tongass from the roadless rule. I believe we as a community, a nation, and a world will be better off with the roadless rule in effect. So thank you for listening, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mike. Any other visitors with views related to the agenda? Dave, state your name and who you represent, please.
My name is David Beebe. I'm representing myself. And as a commercial fisherman, I'm very concerned about the Tongass land management plan revision that we're facing. I'm also very concerned about the fact that this resolution is coming before the council at this time, stating certain assumptions that are not really qualified in the resolution. That last whereas makes assumptions that are suggestive of a more is better approach to primary resource extraction, because after all, that's what these roads are all about. The state is not particularly coy about. They're quite direct. As a matter of fact, I testified in the House Judiciary Committee earlier this year on the resolution that would establish a 2 million acre state forest out of federal lands, out of public lands. By the way, the Petersburg Comprehensive Plan misstates the ownership. It makes the claim that the Forest Service owns these lands, and that's not the case at all. We, the taxpayers, own this land. And that's a very important distinction to be made, because there are certain assumptions around local uses of these larger public lands. I would ask you, just rhetorically, if you have received any supporting documents for this resolution, because I think in the interest of due diligence, the council or the assembly really needs to understand that there's a lot more to the assumptions that are being posed here, and not the least of which is the negative externalities that are going to be associated with this. And those externalities have a lot to do with subsistence resources and the fact that the history of the Forest Service management to date has not provided for sustainable yield of deer populations. And I would also remind you that we all took an oath of office to defend Alaska's Constitution, and Article 8, Section 4 mandates sustainable yield. of all replenishable resources, and those that mandate has yet to be fulfilled. And I urge you all, as having also taken that oath to defend Alaska's Constitution, that you reject the premise and the assumptions that are being advanced by this resolution. Thank you very much.
Any other visitors today in the audience with views related to items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to visitors' views unrelated to today's agenda. Seeing nobody interested in that part of the agenda, we'll move on to board, commission, and committee reports. There's no reports under that section. And that brings us to the consent agenda. There's 2 items, and we will address those separately. A, authorization to accept grant funds in the amount of $149,000 from the Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And that would go towards the building here for antennas and communications. So I'd entertain a motion to authorize that, accepting that grant.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Member Lagadakis, seconded by Member Lynn to authorize the acceptance of this grant. Any discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, the other item, I've separated these out because Mr. Lynn expressed some interest here, is the Petersburg Borough fiscal year 2017 budget calendar. I'd entertain a motion to accept the calendar as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to accept Petersburg Borough 2017 budget calendar. Discussion.
I may be confused, but I thought the consent agenda was something we just voted on without discussion. I don't know where I got that.
We normally do, but Member Lim, when he wanted to change the agenda today, asked to change the meeting agenda, wanted to, it sounded like to me, address this budget calendar,
Okay.
certain issues on it separately, so that's why, yeah, but you're right, Nancy, that's normally how we do it. So, Bob, did you have something?
I have a number of questions. Under that particular first item, assembly to review budget policy, what, Steve, do you have in mind as you're calling budget policies, and where
Well, that's actually the official document.
you're looking at the official document and in hand?
Budget policy document that was prepared. We did it for the first time last year and presented it to
Okay.
the assembly for your
Approval. We then give that to the department heads and tell them, this is how to build your budgets. You must meet these rules.
Okay. Earlier, I believe you sent out some ideas that you had for the budget for next fiscal year. One being is that it's no greater than where fiscal, I don't remember all the details, but essentially no greater than where fiscal year 15 was, and or what the expenditures was, I believe, and so forth. And so if we accept that with where you were at, then does that mean that your intent is that what we get back on November 2nd, it meets that criteria?
My earlier email is trying to give heads up and lots of advance warning to department heads that, in a sense, I'm trying to read your mind.
Yeah, I understand that.
So
yeah.
it's giving them some heads up of things that potentially are going to come down the pike as far as, how to build your budgets. When we get to the budget policy document, that's a little more specific, or I could say maybe less specific in some ways. It's at a strategic level saying, Assembly, where do you want us to be? And it covers, what do you want our general fund balance to be?
Right. What
do you want our enterprise fund balances to be? And if we're not where you want them to be, what's the plan to get there? It doesn't get into the specifics by department of, and now that doesn't mean we couldn't go there if that's what the Assembly as a body wanted to do. But generally, our budget policy document is very high level.
Right.
That's our intention at this point, is to say, here's this high level document, Assembly weigh in. Obviously, you can change that as the group sees fit. And then once that's approved, that goes to the department heads, and that's more of the definitive, here's how you plan your budget.
The reason, here's my concern is that I've just sat through, and I'll talk about it later, a number of listening to Pat Pitney and what's going on at the state level and at our level. And we've talked about the fact that we're pretty healthy right now, but we also, and you've talked too, about the fact that the revenue sharing and some of the others are going to go down. Will that budget document include, I would like to see about a 5-year run out of what you think is going to happen. And I know it's a wild guess, but what you think might be happening with the revenue generation we have on the revenue side. I'm talking about what we have coming in, what we can anticipate. I think locally we're probably pretty stable overall. Where we really got the problem is what comes from the states and the feds. And that's the one I think that we're in jeopardy with. And could we, at that time that you present that, have a run out of what you know, and I know it's a guess, what you think might be happening and so forth. What I'm trying to do is, for my own purposes, to focus on, and I've been asked numerous times, are we in trouble or are we not, so forth, and so, well, I don't know. I don't have all, reasonable information. And I frankly would like to have a discussion, with the Assembly on what the thoughts are. And I guess I'm probably closer, I don't want to make any big leaps, but I'd like to understand the playing field that we're on, if that makes sense to you.
I can speak a little bit to that. There's a document that the department heads have at the moment that outlines where we get federal and state funding, and with specific dollar amounts. They are my last group to review. I've ran the document by our lobbyists both in DC and in Juneau. I've asked Kathy Wasserman at AML to take a look at it. I don't know that I'll get anything back from Kathy or not, but it's worth a shot to get her input. And it's identifying what we get, where it comes from, and then a threat level. I made it very simple. It's not beyond that, but basically, and again, focused mostly on the general fund. That's the area that is the hardest to adjust revenues in. And it does what you're asking. It doesn't say what we'll do about it. It just says, right, here's the threats, and here's what the dollar amounts we're talking about. Once the department heads make sure that I didn't miss anything, my expectation is to get that to the Assembly. And then it becomes part of a community conversation. I've said this before. I've had several meetings with both the school and the hospital. We'll continue to meet on that. The challenge is, this community is used to a lot of quality of life type issues. They want certain things, and how we go about changing, budgets when it comes to the general fund becomes generally a direct result to cutting things rather than the other way around. We don't know what the community wants yet in that area. We also don't know, kind of you hinted at, of what the extent of the problem is. A lot depends on what the state does. And I'm not, unless the Assembly says, Steve, go start, we want $1 million in next year's budget cut or whatever, some number. It's really difficult for me to give you a budget that cuts things until the state says you're not going to get that money anymore. We, in the back of our mind, we're planning. That's kind of the earlier email you talked about, is me going out to department heads, said, plan for this in case. But we really don't know what that is, and I'm not sure I could get community support for making massive cuts to things that we don't even know are going to be cut yet. Yeah. And that's the huge challenge. So, people ask you, are we in trouble or not? The answer is, yeah, maybe. It's, which is not really answering the question, but that's the truth of it. We're fine now. If nothing else changes, we can continue on this route and be just perfectly okay. If the state cuts everything and the feds cut everything, we got a totally different problem. And at that point in time, I think we're going to have to get the community pretty engaged in the process and figure out, how are we going to fund the school? How do we help the hospital? How do we keep the borough at a level of services that the community is comfortable with? And so, anyway, I think it's going to be a work in progress.
Right.
The document, like I said, as soon as the department heads fully vet it, make sure I didn't screw something up, is a start along with the budget policies. I mean, this calendar here is about trying to set a calendar, obviously, which can change as we get into it. Obviously, any weird things that happen in Juneau can have direct impact on what this calendar does, but it starts to set up us so I can schedule vacation time for people, so we know when people need to be here, and that's really what it's all about.
Right, and I'm not disagreeing with the calendar or anything. What my concern is that I'd like that information out there so that we can begin that public dialogue, and so our public can know what we're thinking, or what the best available information is, and that's my bottom line concern on that. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the budget calendar for fiscal year 2017? Yeah, it is a moving target.
It is.
So, like the manager says, until we get information what it seems like is coming from the state and the feds, it's hard to change. So, is everybody, or we'll take a vote. Clerk, call the roll on the assembly members in favor of the 2017 budget calendar.
Cindy,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Nancy.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. Nancy's right. We did do the consent agenda a little bit different today than we normally do, but flexibility is a good thing. Okay, report of other officers, and now we have a report from Susan Erickson from Petersburg Wrangell Insurance on the overview of the borough's liability insurance.
Hi, Susan Erickson, Petersburg Wrangell Insurance. Glad to be here. I had prepared an overview of all the insurance, and the agenda says just liability, so I'll make things a little bit more succinct. And as we all know, the key to a presentation is knowing your audience. And though I am enthused about insurance, perhaps some of you here aren't as enthused as I am, so I'll keep it high level, not in all the detail. What I wanted to talk about, it's been a long time since I've been up here to talk to the council really about the borough's insurance, just as an overall view of it. So a little bit background is our primary carrier for the property insurance, buildings, and liability insurance, everything else, has been provided with Alaska Public Entities Insurance, APEI, for over a decade now. They started off in the 80s and just got bigger and bigger and offering better and better products, and we've been with them for a long time because of the evolution of their products and their competitive place in the market. Their main competitor is Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Arrangement, which for our particular borough and city previously hasn't been competitive for us. They're competitive in some markets, and for us, they just never been competitive. So we've been with them for a long time. They've been handling all of those claims and doing a good job. In 2013, they came down and did an appraisal on all of the city buildings valued at $500,000 and higher, which was fantastic. Because when I took over down at Petersburg Wrangell Insurance, we had this Word document about, for example, this building. When was it built? What's the square footage? When was the heat last update? No one had any idea. So I put together the best I could folklorically, and Ron Bushman put that generator in about 81, or, things like that. When they came down in 2013, they gave us a full appraisal for free of all our properties, which was a really good measure for us to see, okay, we were using $350 a square foot on these frame buildings. What do they say, an actual appraiser in the state in terms of values? And we really weren't too far off. But some of the buildings, they adjusted and whatnot and content. So that was really beneficial for us. They also picked up at least one building that I had no idea even existed. And I mean, I've been here 30 years, and Kathy O'Rear saying things, she was like, where'd this building come from? And I said, no idea, but maybe we need to insure it. So, it was very helpful for us. One other thing about Alaska Public Entities, too, is they do some safety training for us. They were here this spring and put on 2 presentations, one on ergonomics in the workplace, and the other one, I think, was on human resources for department heads. And why they want to do that, the ergonomics especially, is safety of our employees who sit at desks, which a lot of them do all day long, and which leads to being healthier in their workplace, which has an effect on workers' compensation costs for the city. So it's great that they are available for a whole bunch of training if we ever want free training. I know the department heads are probably like, oh my God, training again. But they will come down here and give us a presentation on whatever subject. Another reminder, while department heads are here, they also give us a safety grant of $1,000 every year, and I didn't pay attention last year, did we spend it or not, but it's $1,000 for ice grippers or fire extinguishers or whatever. It's free money. We should make sure we take advantage of that. Then for playgrounds, I don't know, Donnie, if we took advantage of their $10,000 playground grants for upgrading the surfaces or the slides or whatever it is, we pay for it, and then they reimburse us up to $10,000 for safety and playground equipment. So that's important, and I think we can take advantage of that every year. So we want to factor that in as we're preparing budgets and whatnot for the future, too. Basically, what they're providing are our property insurance, our liability, auto, and workers' compensation. Premium-wise, I went back, and over the last 6 years, believe it or not, our premium has only, for those lines, has only increased $11,000 in 6 years, which is really, really good. I mean, it's fantastic. It's a testament to, A, safety within the city and the department heads and what we're doing right, and also investments and claims handling of Alaska public entities. But in 6 years, we've been fairly stable, which is fantastic. I've got breakdowns on how much is property, how much is this, how much is that, but I won't bore you with all that. I will tell you, though, that of the $240,000, almost half of that is workers' compensation costs. That's the big one, which is driven off of our payroll and then our experience, our claims experience within our group, Petersburg Borough. So we're doing good, but it's still, workers' compensation is a huge amount of premium. General liability is kind of a catch-all, which this says I'm going to talk about liability, and I will here. General liability includes, oops, I just slipped and fell here. That's general. Errors and omissions for you guys that say, oh, let's do this or not do this, and someone sues the council members, which we've seen in the past. Law enforcement, legal liability, the police department as an allegation they did something wrong. All that falls under our liability side. Public works, the water is bad, tainted water. All of that comes under general liability. That's about 11% of the budget of that $240,000. We have $15 million limits subject to deductibles, whatnot, except for the new type of insurance, our cyber liability. And that's if I'm going to hack into any of the computers and I'm going to steal all of your data, and you've got to notify everyone. That policy is limited to only $2 million worth of coverage. That one's going to evolve even more and more as time goes by. I mean, we're all reading about it. That's the hottest topic there is right now in terms of protection for anybody whose data we have. Insurance, somebody once said, use the analogy, it's like Swiss cheese. It covers a lot of stuff, but there's holes in everything. And this year, after conversations with Glow in the harbor, we started to hone in on one of our holes in our general liability, which is nothing having to do with boats. I mean, we can tie up the boat, we can give them water, we can give them a dock. If anybody slips and falls, we have insurance for it. But if we do anything to that boat, or we allow people to store things on our property that are boats, we don't have any coverage for that. And it's been fine in the past, but things evolve, and we started having a conversation that, you know, do we do repairs on boats? No. Do we do alterations? No. Do we store boats? Well, yes, we store bait sheds, we store whatever. Do we moor boats? Yes. Do we haul or launch like Wrangell is? No. Do we fuel? No. So a lot we didn't do, but, you know, from time to time after discussions with Glow, even though we don't want to do things, we board people's boats and we say, hey, Priest Point, your alarms are going off. And so we started walking a line, which I became uncomfortable with in terms of, do we have an exposure that there's a hole? That we don't have any insurance for that. If somebody needs assistance tying up their boat, which we normally don't do, but from time to time we do some things, which we had no insurance for. So we thought, okay, let's get a price out there. So this year the decision was made to purchase a policy called Marina Operators Legal Liability. It covers if we tie up your boat, we do it wrong. We go down and flick that switch, and we shouldn't have flicked that switch. You know, we have some coverage for it. Even though we don't do those things, but let's face it, from time to time, in an effort to be a good Samaritan, we do things that we don't want to be liable for later on. We bought a policy, $6,700 for the year. It's only $1 million limit. We chose to just purchase $1 million worth of coverage versus all of our other stuff at $15 million, cyber at $2 million, just because we looked at what's the average value of boats or things that are stored, and we felt like $1 million, maybe it's okay this year. As we get more of these other vessels, maybe we need to take a look at that. So we decided we'd purchase that. Other coverages too, as we start talking in budget in the future, you know, our Homeland Security boat, you know, every town got one. We buy insurance on that too. And in the future, well, maybe we have to assume some risks, you know, but right now there's enough value involved there that we don't want to do anything with that. The other policy that we purchase outside of the Harbor Department is the supplemental accident and sickness policy for our volunteer firefighters, which is a great decision we make there too. Last thing I wanted to touch on before I'll handle any questions, we're on claims, and basically the claims we've had the last couple of years are workers' comp. We have some auto accidents. We accidentally back into people or whatnot. And we had the boiler at the aquatic center. And so I was like, hey, boiler, I think we're going to submit this, and if there's coverage, and there is coverage. So thank goodness it wasn't as bad as we thought, but we're going to get some reimbursement. Well, actually, the school district, since they actually technically own that. And Donnie's working with the adjusters on that. So other than that, knock on wood, that it's been fairly quiet in terms of properties. Oh, another one of those holes, those are things that we don't have coverage for. Earthquake and flood on our buildings. Public Works had a little problem with a landslide a couple of years ago. That's earthquake and flood. That's landslide. We don't have coverage for that. One other hole that I'll identify is pollution. We have never, ever purchased pollution coverage. How many underground storage tanks do we have? I don't think we have any that are active anymore. We do have some above ground tanks, and if it splits, you know, we'll have a pollution event. But cost wise, we've just decided, no, the risk and exposure, we're not going to spend the money on that. We can in the future, I mean, but we haven't needed to at this point. So does anyone have any questions? There's a lot of information.
Susan, one of the, full disclosure, I'm actually on the APEI board, so
Oh, yeah, that's right.
one of the questions, I think it was Abe or Cole that Losman asked, which was, do we have coverage for people doing, you know, outside contractors doing work on boats while in the harbor out on our floats? Is there any liability to the borough? You know, I'm a welder, I mean, and I go down and work on someone's boat in the harbor. What is there? Does the borough have liability to, if I do something stupid and sink somebody else's boat or do something bad?
Yes. there's your bottom line, because we own an insurance policy. If nobody else owns insurance and somebody's injured, trust me, they're going to want somebody to pay. And we've had that discussion before with the Harbor Board, although it's been, I don't know, 3 years ago maybe, and it was just informational and nobody wanted to do anything at that point. There have been, like in the last couple of years, a couple injuries at the harbor where we haven't gotten involved. I mean, people slip and fall, that's one thing. But, for example, let's use me as an example, and this is, the names of, what's that disclaimer they always say, the names and characters have been changed to protect the innocent or whatever. Okay, I'll use myself. Let's say I power wash boats, or I shrink rack boats, or I weld on boats, whatever it is, and I lug all my stuff down there, and I leave my toolbox or my sawhorse, whatever it is, in the middle of the dock, and I'm on a cruise ship, and I'm just walking backwards down the dock, and I trip over it. Well, whose fault is it? Is it the city's fault? No. Is it the person that trips' fault? Well, partially, but you don't expect anything behind you a lot of times. Is it the person that left that in the middle of the road responsible? Probably. It created a hazard which injured someone else. I'm sure a lot of the contractors that use the facility have insurance. I'm sure some don't. It's no different than any of our other city properties, though. I remember there was a guy who wanted to put in a boat storage yard, and holy mackerel, that one took us months and months and months to finally figure out. And anybody who has a land lease with us is required to provide proof of insurance. If I'm going to store my seine skiff on the land, I've got to show the borough clerk proof of insurance. If I'm leasing, no problem. In this particular case that you mentioned, Steve, these are people that are using city property which don't have a lease, therefore they don't have to list us as additional insureds on their policy. If they had well, for example, Wrangell, let's take or any other harbor, really. Harbors have been hit hard in the last, 10 or 12 years. And Glo can probably tell you from going to some of her harbor conferences. I mean, you can't pull into some of these harbors unless you show proof of your insurance, because you're going to knock into a dock, right? And guess who's going to have to deal with it? The owner of the property. Anyway, getting ahead of myself. They require Wrangell, let's take, Seward, Kodiak, any of those harbors. If you're doing work in their harbor, you've got to show general liability, listing the city or borough, whomever, as an additional insured before they're even going to let you enter their facility. You just cannot do it. Why? Because the borough or city's insurance paid millions of dollars that they didn't feel like they should have to pay. So that's...
Am I correct? We don't currently do that, Glo.
We don't do that at the harbor.
Cindy, you have a question?
I have a crystal ball question, and it wasn't something I even thought about until you started this discussion. If at some point we do take responsibility for the dock at Kupernoff and the one at Papke's, is that going to appreciably change what our insurance bill is?
No, we have docks as it is.
Okay.
The problem is being on the hook when we are really not the responsible party, just because we happen to have insurance. Mm-hmm. There's your bottom line. And there's all kinds of insurance. Like I said, I wanted to keep it high level. Like me, for my power washing boats or whatever, I'm going to buy this big policy in case I sink that boat. I don't need that. Those other boroughs and whatever, they just require you to have this little one which says if somebody slips over that sawhorse or whatever it is. I mean, there's two different kinds of policies, and this one, if the city ever went in that position, same what they do with the land leases though. We're not talking huge amounts of money, but we're protecting ourselves. So.
Any other questions of Sue about the insurance? Thanks, Sue.
You're very
Thank you
welcome.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the mayor's report. 16 candidates filed for the October 6th, 2015 election. A big thank you to the 16 borough citizens who filed for candidacy in this year's election. There's only one contested race for seats on the Harbor and Ports Advisory Board in that election. Appointment of election workers for the October 6th, 2015 borough election. Borough Clerk Thompson recommends the appointment of the following individuals to work the October 6th election: Kathy Harris, Mary Leonard, Erica Warhatch, and Chad Wright. The election workers will be compensated at the rate of $12 per hour. And while we're on this subject, is that who appoints them? Assembly? I can't remember doing this. Is that just
Yeah, I don't think so. I think
if maybe we should look into it? And
Yeah.
There's some technical thing that we have to be correct.
we can do.
Special assembly meeting to canvass the October 6th election results. The Borough Assembly will canvass the municipal election results on Friday, October 9th, 2015. Clerk Thompson requests the Assembly set a time for the meeting. Any objections to noon? Does that work for everybody?
I'll be able to come.
Oh, okay. That's something I would imagine, have to have a quorum.
Yes. You have to vote and approve the election results.
That's in November, right? I've got Cindy being gone in October. Well, we have a couple more meetings, but we'll just set the meeting for noon if that works for everybody.
I may also be gone that day. I need to look at my calendar.
So the newbies aren't on, so that means we won't have a quorum with Mr. Haberlick not participating.
I'm around, I take off 8th and at noon, so anytime earlier in the week would be...
Is there a certain time frame where you have to wait before you can canvass an election?
Yeah, we have to have the results counted. We'll bring it back to you at the next meeting.
Sounds good. Okay. More to come. Keep in tune. Okay, draft comprehensive plan and waterfront master plan. The borough is seeking comments on a new draft comprehensive plan and waterfront master plan. The plans can be viewed or downloaded by going to the borough's webpage at www.petersburgak.gov. That's all lowercase. And clicking on the provided link. Comment deadline on the draft plans is September 30th, 2015. And we're seeking letters of interest. The Petersburg Historical Preservation Committee has a vacancy for an architect or at-large member. Appointee will serve until December 31st, 2015. Letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov or mailed to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, 99833. Or you can just drop it off by the office. There is a meeting of a Cake Access EIS project. The Federal Highway Administration, in partnership with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, will hold a public meeting in Petersburg on Thursday, September 10th from 6 to 8 p.m. And that's in the Assembly Chambers, and that's to discuss developments of the Cake Access EIS project since the March public meetings. They will discuss the revised purpose and needs statement, the screening process established, the alternatives that will be moved forward, and the next steps in the EIS process. And that is all I have for the mayor's report. That brings us to the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Public Works staff will be installing a new fire hydrant next to piston and rudder as requested by the fire department and in conjunction with the road work that was occurring out there. Dave Carlson has agreed to donate 2 old cement mixers to the wastewater department. We don't really want the trucks, but we want the drums, which will be used for, we're going to convert them to rotary composters, which will help make it easier to do the composting. We're in the process of getting them from 7 Mile down to the treatment plant to start the process of modifying them. And should work fairly well. Allows you to turn compost without having to do it the hard way. We did have a small landslide next to the road leading out to the Cabin Creek Dam. The water line is not in any danger, but Public Works will actually do some cleanup work to make sure that it keeps it from sliding into the road, down in the future. The annual landfill inspection report was received a score of 87%. Most of the issues that need to be addressed are standing water at the edge of the landfill and sludge seeps from the recently capped monofill site. We do have some other issues, including a need for kind of focus on safety for the salvage operations. They kind of cited that a little bit, and the need to store collected lead-acid batteries indoors. Overall, the landfill was praised as a good operation, and we received bonus points for our recycling program in operating a mandatory sanitation service and operating a successful fee-based enterprise fund. So, good job, Carl, and your staff. Preparations for the recycling transition to carts continues. The carts have been received and assembled. We're just waiting for the truck, which is scheduled to be here in November. And commercial recycling customers will be polled by staff to make sure, what kind of service do they want continued, and if they want to utilize carts or not in that process. The new street sweeper arrived. A bit of a story on that. And worked well for the very short period of time that the guys were actually able to operate it. It'll work really well. Unfortunately, there's something going on that was causing damage to the starter. The owner and the vendor of the Enviro Clean equipment, he came to Petersburg for the training session and is basically handling the fix himself. They paid to ship the unit back to Oregon to investigate and repair the unit in their shop. Once they're fully satisfied that the unit is 100%, they will ship it back to us. We are withholding payment until such time that it gets here and we can check it out to make sure that it's not a lemon or some other problem. But the time while we had the unit operational, it'll be really, really nice, much easier to use. But we got some hurdles to get through first. Seacon's concrete subcontractor continues to make progress on the South Nordic sidewalks. The sidewalk work will continue into the fall with final paving on South Nordic not scheduled until next year. We're just trying to continue to remind people about that. They've done some nice patching and smoothing over where they did major work. Hopefully that will last into next year. The bridge was not on that part, so we'll have to endure a rough bridge for at least another year here. Rockin' Road has finished the install of the new force main on South Nordic. And Carl, has that been pressure tested at this point?
Yeah, fast.
That's what I thought. So that has been tested and we're in good shape there. Reminder to everyone, property taxes are due September 30th in the finance office. The rate increases for the electric department that were previously approved by the Assembly will be implemented at the end of this month. Mike Renfro, our borough assessor, was here for several days last week, and his staff arrived on the 8th and will be here for 7 to 10 days doing assessments and meeting with folks. So take advantage of that as you can. We did discover a problem with the community warning siren in a routine test. That's why we do testing on them. It wasn't working properly. Sandy worked with Jerry Whitethorn to troubleshoot the issues. The siren is now working, thanks to everyone involved. Jerry spent a lot of time, and we will get a bill for that, but he typically doesn't charge us for as much time as he actually puts in, so we appreciate all that. The library is currently surveying the parents of the Summer Reading Challenge to help improve the program next year. Survey ends September 15th, can be found on the library's website. Many of the Rainforest Festival events will be taking place at the library. Notably, Master Haida weaver Dolores Churchill will be teaching a 2-day basket weaving workshop at the library. We're planning our annual closure at the library for September 21st and 22nd. During that time, they'll do an inventory of our DVD, CD collections, moving some shelving in the children's area for better supervision, shifting some shelving in the foyer, and recoding the entryway, restroom, slate floors to make sure that they stay in good shape and are easy to maintain. We, with the help of Public Works and the Parks and Rec, what's left of the Parks and Rec team, the stairway at City Creek has been removed. and we're evaluating the possibility of putting a short landing pad as an outlook for that spot. But the stairway had gotten really, really bad shape, and as many times as we had blocked it off and told people not to walk on it, they'd tear down our barricades and walk down it. So the decision was made to remove it permanently to avoid somebody getting hurt out there. Public Works crew is beginning the cemetery utilities project. This was part of the getting the columbarium in there, is getting some utilities up in that area. Appreciate the help of Power and Light on that project. We're still working, Donnie's doing most of the work, but trying to schedule a meeting with Little League to discuss the options for next year's ball fields. The person that we had on payroll, there was a seasonal maintenance person. That position has been eliminated, and so when their position ends here in another month or so, we will not be bringing that person back the next following year. So we're asking Little League and the school, if possible, to kind of take over the maintenance on that. Donnie's been tasked with making that happen, so I make him the bearer of the bad news. But we're working with them to try to get some rules set up so we can help them as much as we can, but with the understanding we just don't have the staff to continue doing that. SEPA's meeting was originally scheduled for September 23rd and 24th here in Petersburg. It's actually been rescheduled to the 14th and 15th. Accommodate the travel, it's a one-day meeting. It begins in the afternoon of the first day and reconvenes the following morning, allowing the board members to catch the afternoon jet. So if you're interested in the SEPA meeting, it's here in a couple days. The low-level outlet valve at Crystal Lake Dam was exercised on the 26th. It's a valve that's only used during an emergency to quickly lower the level of the lake, and was last used during the 1997 penstock break. FERC, as part of their annual inspection, asked us to show them that it would work, and it did. So we were very happy. The thing has not been touched for a long time, and it opened and worked without any problem. So FERC was happy, and so were we. Congratulations to Randy Holmgren. He was selected for promotion to sergeant in the PD with the effective date of September 1st. Officer John Dodson has arrived and is settling in, and Kent Preston has accepted the final officer position and is due to be in. He's here, isn't he? The joys of doing this after the fact. So we are full in the PD as we speak. All DMV equipment has been turned over to the Petersburg Vehicle Title and Registration. DMV services are no longer at the PD, and we are sending people down there, up there as needed. We did have an interesting summer. We had kind of a increase in alcohol-related incidents in town. We did turn that over to the ABC and they've asked for reports to be forwarded to them. We don't know what'll come of that. I know they're facing staffing shortages, so we don't know exactly if that means they'll send somebody to town or not. But they did ask for the reports from Kelly's officers in what they had to deal with. We did have a commercial psychedelic mushroom grow located in town. It's a fairly expansive investigation with 3 defendants identified. In addition, we had another defendant indicted for misconduct involving a controlled substance in the first degree, and it led to an indictment and arrest warrant for sexual abuse of a minor. So none of this was good. Defendant was taken into custody, and a bail was currently set at $100,000. So congratulations to Kelly's crew. Not the most pleasant thing to have to get in the middle of, but part of their job. And thanks to the Hoona Police Department, who sent 2 officers and their canine to assist us with that investigation. Made it much easier having the canine and the extra help. So appreciate everyone involved.
All right, thanks, Steve. Any questions of the manager on his report? Okay, we'll move forward to new business, and the first item under new business is ordinance 2015-13, and this is an ordinance providing for chapter 16.24, cemetery of the municipal code, updating fees and current language to reflect borough incorporation, and this is the first reading of that ordinance. Entertain a motion to adopt this in its first reading.
So moved.
Second. And moved by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Logadakis to adopt ordinance 2015-13 in its first reading. Any discussion on this? Okay, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2015-13 passes unanimously in its first reading. Next item under new business is resolution 2015-18. This is a resolution urging the state of Alaska, the governor, to petition the Supreme Court in response to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reversal of the three-judge panel's decision on the Tongass exemption from the roadless rule. So entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to adopt resolution 2015-18. Any discussion? Jay?
The roadless rule, in my opinion, is far from perfect, but I think it does. I think it's an important part of preserving the long-term health and sustainability of our subsistence and commercial fisheries, and plus, I think, a wealth of other reasons. But based on those primarily, I can't support this resolution at present.
Okay. Any other discussion on 2015-18? Cindy?
I'm always at. This is such a hot topic with so many people that it's uncomfortable to even speak out about it. I very much appreciate the comments, the very thorough comments that Ms. Knight made about the Tongass, about subsistence, but there are other things that also argue in favor of not moving this forward. One is the cost of litigation, and right now the state is not in a position to be throwing money at, speculatively at things. If you look at the Alaska Forestry Association website, they lay out some information on the costs of logging in Southeast Alaska. And although they're trying to make the case that we should move forward with logging, they very clearly make the case that many sales are below cost sales or don't generate as much income as we would like to think that they would. I don't feel that the roadless rule seriously impacted the ability of the Tongass to generate logging, to generate income from logging. I do think it had some impact. I think the bigger impact to economics is just the cost of operating in Southeast Alaska. And so on the one hand, when the roadless rule exemption first came into being, there are issues with ANILCA and some other legislation, Tongass Timber Reform Act, that I understand, but I don't see this as really accomplishing any particular objective. The Tongass has been trying for over 20 years to get to a second growth management objective, and we're still not there. We're still talking about transition to it. I don't think that roadless is the thing that's keeping that from happening. As I said before, I think economics overall is the thing that's keeping this from happening. So I feel like this resolution is a false promise. We're not going to revive the timber industry in large measure in Southeast Alaska because this resolution and any legislation goes forward. I just don't think that that's going to happen. And so I can't support it.
Nancy?
I'm inclined to support it. I'm uncomfortable by the blanket inclusion of the entire forest in it. It's too bad they aren't able to say we'll deal with each section of road when we come to it. I think the blanket inclusion, plus there's more, like Becky said, there's 2/3 of the forest is rock and ice, and with mining exploration becoming more and more active, it seems to me that they should perhaps rethink the roadless rule. So I'm in favor of it.
Bob, do you have a comment?
I don't think that the logging as it was known at one time will ever come back. I'm in agreement on that. I do have concerns about the roadless rule. And if you go back to the legislative history of it down south and so forth, it was totally intended for a different purpose, and which has come out on Alaska, as I see it. I will support it from the standpoint that I think we need to come to a yes, and right now we're at an absolute no. And both parties saying, no, we shouldn't be interim, and the other party saying, yes, we should. There has to be some in between, and I think it needs to come to a yes. I don't agree with the argument on the deer populations. I've seen way too many studies on the Tongass related to that I don't agree with that. But I'm going to support it because I think it's time that I don't agree with going to court and doing that. I think there needs to be some kind of a getting to yes here, because there needs to be jobs in Southeast Alaska. I'm sorry, there just has to be. And however we get there, I think we need to have that begin to generate that discussion. So.
Okay, I guess that leaves me to my opinion. This ended up on our agenda today because I got an email from Julie Decker from the Wrangell Assembly and told me that they were going to address it and asked if we would have it on our agenda. So I said, well, it can't hurt, I guess. It's always good to have this discussions, and I knew it would be controversial, like it always is when you talk about cutting down a tree or building a road. But so far, in support of this, having the governor ask the federal court to reverse it to allow Tongass to be exempt from the roadless rule is Senator Murkowski, Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, State Senators Egan and Stedman, Representative Munoz and Ortiz from Ketchikan, the Ketchikan Gateway Borough, and the Wrangell Borough Assembly. And I got an email from Julie yesterday with letters, and I had the borough clerk email them to you today. I don't know if you had time to read them, but there's a letter from Senator Stedman in support of it, and his main reason for supporting it is he doesn't think the federal government did its total due diligence in reviewing the matter, and he also says it could cost jobs in the region, and I agree with that. I think we need to have easier. I'm not in favor of clear-cut logging. I mean, that's a thing of the past, or maybe not building the roads, but if you hold up road construction to a mine or to for hydro projects, for instance, if the road was ever to go through the Cake, by not being able to build a road and have to using mat roads, that increased the cost of that hydro line significantly. So I'm in support of this resolution to ask the governor to ask the federal court to reverse their decision. And seeing as how we've all said our piece, anybody else have anything to add? Or?
Well, I'd just like to make the observation that if subsistence hunting is less in Woodpecker Cove, perhaps it's because the deer have migrated to downtown where there's easy garden grazing.
Better browse. Okay, well, any other input? That being said, will the clerk call the roll?
Nancy.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes.
Cindy.
No.
Bob.
Yes.
Jay.
No.
Okay, the vote fails 3-2. Takes 4 in the affirmative to make it pass. So, communications. Mike Swartz, you have some input for us today on the proposed Matheson fishing dock project, I believe. Sorry, I wish I would have been thinking about this earlier. I would have moved you farther up in the meeting, but I thought you'd find this interesting, so I just getting back at you for being my 6th and 7th grade teacher.
Did I spot you? No.
I won't talk about that.
Can you see it? It's still there.
Yes.
Sorry. I'll be right here.
Can you please introduce yourself, Mike? I already did.
I
But
will.
thank you. They might not believe me that it's really you.
You won't believe that I was your 6th grade teacher.
That could be too. You don't look that old.
Oh yeah, right. I don't have any money for you. I'm here on behalf of Mary, Desi, and Lisa Matheson. Their father, who passed away a number of years ago, had a vision, and it's the Matheson Fishing Park. And I don't know if you're all familiar with where this is located. Is there anybody that doesn't know where this site is?
This is over in where Martinson's warehouse used to be?
Yeah, if you look here, this is the Borough warehouse.
That's not on my picture, so.
Huh.
It's right in front of Steve and Desi's house.
Well, if it's right in front of their house, then the creek is misplaced.
Well, it's towards town.
It's about where Martinson's warehouse used to be then.
Yeah, the creek runs down by Andy's driveway where Andy used to live. Okay. This is the creek. Anyway, approximately 8 years ago, Andy Mathieson donated these 3 tideland lots. This little tideland lot sold for over $200,000. So I'm assuming that these larger tideland lots are probably worth at least $300,000. Along with the donation of the tideland lots, he donated $100,000 in cash, which the borough has tucked away in a fund somewhere. Andy's grandson, Seth, and his son-in-law, Lance Merrick, have volunteered to do all the engineered drawings for this project. And this is all to be wheelchair accessible, handicap accessible. That was his dream. And at this point, you know, the girls know that there's a shortfall of money and that nothing's going to happen tomorrow or maybe next year or whatever. But they would like to know whether or not the borough is interested in seeing this project go forward. They'd like to see it possibly on a priority list of some kind. I addressed the PIA group the other night before last, and they were very excited about it, and they were willing to put it on their priority list if that was something that the borough was willing to do. So anyway, in addition to that, you know, I started thinking about all the different handicapped accessible places that we have on the island. It's unbelievable how many we do have when you think about what the Forest Service has done. We have the Rapids, Blind Slough Rapids. We have the Loop Trail at the Rapids. Man-Made Hole is wheelchair accessible. Omer Creek, the Blind Slough Bridge has 2 platforms actually that wheelchair folks could fish off of. The Swan Observatory is wheelchair accessible. Raven's Roost Trail, the Whale Observatory, the trail below the cemetery. And I've talked to Ron Loesch. His boat is handicapped friendly. I could see where in the future possibly we would have boats here that could actually take wheelchair. I'm thinking about wounded warriors. And he was thinking about handicapped people in general. And I don't know why Petersburg couldn't be put on the map in Alaska as one of the most handicapped friendly communities, and it would help us, I think, economically. But anyway, what I was hoping and what the girls were hoping was that they would like to keep this money available and the land available, but they need some indication from the borough that it's a project that they're interested in. If it isn't, you know, if it isn't something that the borough's interested in, then, you know, they can take their $100,000 back and the property back and go about their business. They're not threatening anything. They know this can't happen right away. They would just like to know that it's a potential possibility. Now, I've talked, one of the biggest problems that we have with this project is maintenance. I've talked to Donnie about it. I've talked to our manager about it. And I could tell you that I will volunteer for the rest of my life to power wash those. But at 74, I might be dead by the time this happens. So I guess I could volunteer my grandchildren. But the other thing, I don't know if there's any questions at all, but this portion of the right-of-way is up in front of Roy Otness's house. And so this is the approach, and it's all graded, galvanized metal. It comes down to this portion. What I talked to the girls about was eliminating. I talked to Jim Martinson about this, and he said, most of the fishing we know takes place here. He said if we eliminated this portion of the project, that we could decrease the cost of that project by about 30 or 35%. And most of us that have lived here for any length of time know that all the activity, or most of the activity, takes place here. Also, this would come down to, I'm guessing, maybe the 12, 13, 14 tide line, and then this would go down and would be supported by piling, metal piling. And this, rather than being cement, could also be made out of a galvanized material. And Jim thought that it would have a lifespan of at least 50 years, same kind of a lifespan you would expect out of our harbors. So, I'm sorry, dear. Anyway, do you have any questions about this project? The money's been there and the land's still there. It's not going away.
Any questions? I assume that's going to require a 404 permit and state Thailand's permit to go with it?
Yes, it is. And Lance Merrick is an engineer who works out of Anchorage, very familiar with what happens in Southeast. Seth is an engineer down south, but they would know how to design and build this so that it would fulfill all those. They're not going to have any fill in here. These would be all piling. And Jim Martinson was thinking, as narrow as this would be, you could have single piling with bracing coming off. And his just off the top of his head, he was saying, well, this could be a $400,000 or $500,000 project, but if we eliminated this. And then talking to PIA, they have a vision of creating a bicycle pathway from Hungry Point all the way into town. And if that were to occur, and for example, if the borough would say, well, we'll put this on our 20-year priority list, PIA would come in behind and they could possibly do something in conjunction with their plan to provide this ramp that comes down. So, anyway, any questions?
Any other questions of Mike?
I just want to say thank you for the vision of making Petersburg a dot on the map for accessibility. I think that's an interesting concept that maybe we should explore. I'm a little concerned about the maintenance as well, and I know Donnie's been kind of sucking in his breath each time a new project comes online. But overall, I'm definitely supportive of the concept.
Well, I just think the community has an incredible opportunity to, there could be a focus on this town for the handicapped, for our wounded warriors. I mean, I've had handicapped people on my boats before, kids in wheelchairs. And I'm telling you, there is absolutely nothing like it. John Ingey's son, who was in a wheelchair, and daughter were in a wheelchair. We got him in our boat, took him up Petersburg Creek to show him bears. Got him up to the cabin, they saw the bears, came back, put him on the bow, tied him down. I said, hang on, we're going 35 miles an hour, and he had his hands up in the air, and he had a good time. Thank you.
And I've got a question for the manager. Maybe you don't know, and I can't recall in the years that I've been here. Has that ever been on the priority list?
It is actually on the Assembly capital project list. It's never been prioritized in top 20. I think it's consistently been under that top 20 list. But it's actually on the list of projects. Just has never been prioritized farther up the chain.
I thought it had. I mean, I personally think it's a great idea. It's right now it's the funding one to get it built, and then the maintenance of it, especially with state cuts and Donnie's cutting positions in Parks and Rec. And you said you'd take care of it, but like you said, you're
sure I'll take care of it. One other thing, I've talked to different people about the Rasmussen Fund, and they always want to see money put forward. Well, we've got $500,000 here, pretty much in value. They also want to see that the community is in favor of it. And once you put it on a priority list, or PIA puts it on a priority list, then these two young men, Seth and Lance Merrig will draw up those engineer drawings, and they're worth $100,000, I would think. And then we could go to the Rasmussen Fund. Apparently, what they want are engineered drawings. They want to know you're okay with it, and that there's money there. So, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Something to look at, getting it more shovel ready. You never know, I suppose.
Like I said, it's been on the capital project list. It's just not been, one of the top 20 that the assembly has. So. And I don't want to speak for Donnie. I think his letter does a better job of that. But we like the project. It's just, wanted to be open with the assembly that he doesn't have the staff to maintain it.
Right.
I mean, not that we have the money to build it, but I mean, we'd have to add people back or arrange something with the community if it was actually built. So.
Okay, thanks again, Mike, for your presentation. There's no more discussion on that item. We'll move to assembly discussion items, and Mr. Lynn had some items he wanted to bring forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I attended the Fall Municipal League meeting. One of the presentations was on the from the director of alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana now. And so they were talking about, I wanted to just update the assembly and folks about what's been going on. The director says right now online that there's 5 of the 9 articles related to marijuana is out available for public review. And these have to do with the growing, testing, and the sale of marijuana. So they're online for public review right now. I guess there's a 40-day review on each of those. The intent is to have all the articles, all 9 of them on available for review sometime this month. And their intent is to have everything finished by the 1st of November or thereabouts, so that everything will be completed and then available for the next stage. A couple points there is an intent on the marijuana board's part to have public hearings for 2 days sometime in early October for the public throughout Alaska to talk about the draft rules. And they're trying to set up so that it can be used through the LIO so that you can use that process in those facilities to do it, which I thought was a pretty good idea. At the same time, which was kind of interesting to me, at the same time now they're developing these rules, they have decided to go back and to take a look at the regulations related now to alcohol at the same time. And there was a couple reasons for that. One of them is that they really hadn't been updated. I don't remember the exact time frame, but they hadn't been updated for about 20 years, really, is what they said. And so what they were looking at is that both processes really need to be on kind of the same page, going along the same way. And so they now have, I understand, a couple of the rules related to alcohol that are out there for under revision and for public comment on. The idea is to bring both processes along, as I said, the same way, but both of them will be, when they're finished, will be electronic, so that if you want a grow permit, you'll go online and apply for it right online as a grow permit, or even if you're updating your alcohol license or you're applying, you go online and you can do that. And there is listening to the process. It's going to supposedly be user-friendly, tell you what you can do or can't do, and you can make adjustments from that. And that was kind of interesting. Of course, at the same time, their intent is to update the fees too for both processes, particularly alcohol. There was 2 things in those rules which I thought were quite interesting. On the marijuana side, and I can't tell you which article it's in, but they are trying to write it such that if a municipality has, in effect, zoning rules or some ordinance which restricts the use, which restricts growing, selling, or so forth, that the intent of then to issue either a growing permit or later a retail permit and so forth, it will be denied if the particular municipality has, in effect, some rules, either zoning rules or some ordinance, prohibiting in some area, which was kind of interesting. The director was saying their intent is to put the municipalities more in charge and to be able to better, I don't want to say deny, that's not the right word, but to help focus where this is going to be done, which was kind of interesting to me. And that's the way they're drafting now, are intending to go back and to draft both rules. We got into the issue of testing, and that one kind of surprised me because I always thought, you would have to send a product off, and of course you can't do that because of it's an interstate product and so forth. But they're talking about mobile testing equipment. And the idea being is that testing equipment would come into your locality. And since the testing equipment doesn't have any kind of marijuana on it, which would prohibit it from being sent, by interstate commerce, it comes right. They would bring the testing equipment on site and test the quality of it right on site, which was interesting to me. And they're writing rules such that, and looking at ways that's to be done in Alaska. Two other points here is that one is that they decided also that they're going to concentrate on the growing side first. So when we get into the permit issuance, what they said is that they're not going to, at this point, from lessons learned in Colorado, they're not going to really work a lot with the retailing side, as they're going to first work on the growing side, issue permits and doing that type of thing, which was interesting to me. At the same time, they'll be working on the other part, but their intent is to focus on the growing side of that first. And last, they decided that in the rules that no municipality in Alaska can be the sole retailer of the product. So it has to be, it's open for multiple people to do it, which was, again, kind of interesting.
The rail belt won't get one on us there, will they?
Yeah, and that's what I learned. But it's going a lot quicker than I thought it would, and they were pretty positive about the comments. Oh, one last point on it. They talked about the edibles, and that got to be an interesting conversation. The way the board has come down is that because it's really hard to test the strength of it, like you have 80 proof alcohol and 8 proof or 9 proof beer or what have you. They've decided that the edible products are going to have to be made in such a way that it will be made in what I'll call a small portion. And they used an example, a Hershey bar, which is broken into, various pieces. And so that you can take one piece and try it. If it's, you can handle that, you can go to another one. But their intent is that any products that will be made or sold in Alaska will have to be made into small portions and, be able to divide it up, which was interesting. And that's all I have on that particular issue. The other one we had Pat Pitney was the governor's, finance director there, talking about the state of the budget. And I won't bore you with a lot of the details, but two things came forward. One is that the governor's budget this year is going to come forward, obviously, with more budget cuts, is what we were told, but also with ways to generate more revenues at the same time. What they're going to be, she really didn't say, but she says that's part of the discussion that's going on right now. We had another presentation there from the Rasmussen Foundation, who's done a survey over Alaska of government and do we have too much, too little, and so forth. But one of the interesting things that come out of that is they developed what I'll call kind of an interactive model that says that you cannot generate sufficient money in Alaska simply by budget cuts. You are going to have to find some other way to generate income. And that, bottom line, they went through quite an exercise on that, which was really interesting. And then they talked about the gas pipeline in Alaska. One of the municipality officials asked a couple questions, but one of the questions is that, well, this whole issue is going to go away. And they said, because we're going to have the gas pipeline. The state officials that were there said no. They said there's a number of issues involved with this. Apparently the governor sees the potential revenue generation from that pipeline is much greater than what was originally thought. So now they're rethinking what we as Alaskans need to take for revenues off that pipeline. Exactly how that whole process works, we didn't get into, I don't know, but the idea was. But the bottom line they talked about was no matter what happens, there's two things. One is that it's at least 10 to 15 years out before there's anything ever comes through that pipeline. and there is an issue related to the location. The idea is to put that pipeline alongside the current oil pipeline, essentially, and to do a lot of it along those lines. But the companies that own that right-of-way are not totally in favor of that. So apparently there's quite a discussion going on between the two groups. And they said no matter what, it isn't going to happen overnight. And the other question that was asked by a number of municipalities, particularly up on the north slope, was the Chukchi Sea exploration. And that was an interesting discussion. Obviously, you may have been watching it in the papers or online, but they're looking at, they brought the big the exploration rigs in and they're testing it. But the question was, to the attorneys was, can Alaska benefit from that? And obviously, how long out would it be? And it was interesting, when we got all done with the discussion, the answer was nobody knew, and that it was there. Simply, they said we have to go back and study what the enabling legislation was for the state in order to determine whether or not we could generate we could take, as a state of Alaska, oil revenues off of it. And that's all I have. But I thought some of that was kind of interesting.
Well, thanks for the update. Didn't get to make it to that meeting, so that's good. Thanks for filling us in on those topics. Any questions of Bob on that? Okay. No more assembly discussion items. Recognitions. Anybody have any recognitions of anybody? Nancy?
I have one brief recognition. I'd like to recognize Bobby Dolan for efficient removal of a major tripping hazard in the city parking lot, and Liz Cabrera for assistance and using Joe Bertignoli's wrecking bar. Thank you.
All right. Any other recognitions? Any staff have any recognitions of anybody? Or okay. Well, with seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Meeting is done at 1:32 p.m.